Governor, when we think about the shutdown, Los Angeles, San Francisco, they were among the first to shut down, but now it looks like they'll be among the last to reopen. Why is that?
Because the pandemic has impacted those parts of the state more acutely than other parts of the state, particularly L.A. County. Just over the last 24 hours, as an example, about 75% of the deaths that we reported came just out of one county, L.A. County. So we continue to be vigilant, and we continue to monitor region by region the activity across the state.
People across the state want to reopen. And when you look at California, you've got huge beaches and outdoor spaces. You don't have a lot of public transportation. So crowded areas like New York isn't something that you have to face. Why wait so long? The pressure is on.
Well, the pressure's on, but we're guided by data, not political pressure. We're guided by the facts on the ground. When you talk about density, the San Francisco Bay Area region is one of the most dense regions in the United States. So one has to be cautious. Again, California has many parts. 21 states' populations combined could reside in the state of California, fifth largest economy in the world. So we really look region by region. We look at the conditions on the ground. And I do recognize, trust me, deeply, the desire for people to reopen, and we're making progress in that space.
Does that put you in a difficult position? Because while opening regionally using research and data is the right answer, people feel the way they feel. Is the president boxing Democratic governors like yourself in with getting people so revved up to just let it rip and reopen when you're trying to do the responsible thing? Politically, is that a bad move for you?
Yeah, I don't know about the politics. At the end of the day, this is not a time for politics. This is a time to focus on public health, public safety, and to be guided by the data and public health. And in this respect, Stephanie, look, I come from a private sector background. I've had the privilege of starting over 24 businesses. So I have a sense of what businesses need. And at the end of the day, what they need is consumer confidence. They need people to know that they're going to be safe and they're going to be healthy when they're doing business with you. And that's why I don't see this as an either or. I think our economic fate and future is completely tied to the public health efforts that are underway. And that's the foundational principle that derives our decision making.
For lower income people, for families, the best way they can advance economically, their children, is through education. And the longer kids aren't in school, my kids have the best school opportunities, and even they are getting probably 30% less than they would in a normal school year. What that is doing to kids in worse school systems is significantly worse. Do you need to start looking closer at reopening schools?
I think you're spot on. Look, I've got 4 young kids. The oldest is 10. And so I have an intimate appreciation of the struggles families are facing as it relates to the challenges of distance learning and the inequities, the disparities that persist that came into this crisis that are highlighted and exposed even more acutely in this crisis as it relates to the differentiation of those learning capacity. So, look, we're working very closely with our K through 12 education system and our system of higher education about the modifications we'll look forward to jumpstart our schools. And what I mean by jumpstart, looking at potentially bringing in earlier a cohort of students earlier than the traditional fall school session to begin to educate people and address the issue of learning loss in a much more dynamic way.
You need the federal government to give you massive support right now. And you have said if they don't give financial aid to California, they will be punishing first responders. What do you mean by that?
Not just in California, all across this country. Look, at the end of the day, as a former mayor, I know this intimately. Cities, broadly speaking, roughly 70% of their budgets are payroll. And the impact of this crisis and deficits that cities and counties are facing, not just states, is overwhelming. And as a consequence of that, you saw this in the Great Recession. More proof do you need than just a recent example of the vulnerability of our frontline employees, police officers, firefighters, our nurses, and obviously our teachers. And those that we value the most are vulnerable. And that's why the federal government at this unique moment with depression-era unemployment and an economic crisis no one could have imagined 100 days ago now is presenting itself in a sense that we now collectively need the federal government to do more and help support cities, counties, and states and those heroes that have really shone brightly through this pandemic.
Yes, sir, but can we look at this unemployment and really compare it to the Depression or any other time in history? It was a forced shutdown. The demand hasn't disappeared. The reason so many people are on unemployment is because we told businesses they needed to close down for a while.
That's right. But the reality is it's not a usual economic crisis in this sense. So we have unemployment that is approaching and approximating the Depression-era levels. But disproportionately, that unemployment is reflected in the service sector that now represents 3/4, or rather 2/3, of the GDP in this country. And that sector has been crushed. And as a small business person myself, I intimately appreciate this point. Many of those businesses aren't coming back. So you're absolutely right from the demand perspective, but the ability for those workers to come back quickly is going to be substantially impacted by the nature of change of our economy that's radically different from the 20s compared to where it is today.
The amount of unemployment benefits you're having to pay out is crippling. So let's talk about your state's situation. If California was a country, your economy would be the 6th largest in the world. Your own finance department estimates that you are now looking at a record $54 billion shortfall, and residents of California are already facing the highest personal income tax rate in the country. How do you get out of this?
Well, last year we had a $21.5 billion operating surplus. Paid down our debt. We're using $9 billion of that surplus to pay down long-term pension obligations, the lowest unemployment in our state's history, and 5 years of average GDP growth north of 3.8%. We've been managing the affairs of the state very effectively and efficiently, and we come into this crisis, in specific answer to your question, with the highest reserves we've had in our history. So we're going to do our best to manage our budget over the next few years, but the magnitude of a $54.3 billion shortfall when I was announcing surpluses 100 days ago is such that the impact will be felt on public health, public safety, and our public education system. And that's where the federal government can do so much to help Americans in states large and small, including ours, to meet this moment and help support us through this difficult time.
These stay-at-home orders are rooted in safety. Yet the Justice Department is now saying your stay-at-home order is discriminating against churches. What's your response?
I have deep faith and devotion to our churches. I grew up in the church and went to Jesuit University. I have deep reverence for congregants and parishioners that want to reconnect to their community and to their faith and be able to practice accordingly. We're just a few weeks away from meaningful modifications that will allow just that to happen.
Before we go, what's your number one fear right now? Where do you think we'll be 10 months from now?
I fear that we have developed a little bit of amnesia, that we've forgotten the virulence of this virus. We've forgotten about the lives lost. We've sort of decided that it's in our rear view as opposed.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.